Your alumni love helping students and fellow graduates, but they simply don't have time to attend every event, answer every call, or learn yet another online platform. With Protopia, making an impact is easier than it's ever been before. Ever. There's no new app to sign up for or use in our already busy lives. Students, alumni, or even staff can quickly ask for advice or networking via a simple form, email, or text. Protopia's artificial intelligence searches the institution's existing alumni data to find the best experts that are the most likely to assist based on experience, availability, location, and other factors. Each matched alum receives a direct, blind email to ask them to help, giving alumni full control over if and how they want to respond, whether that's by email, call, or a virtual meeting. And if it's not a good time, Protopia's AI simply reaches out to the next alum until the question has been answered. The student receives advice right into her email inbox and is coached to engage the alum to grow her professional network. Finally, our rich dashboard lets staff follow along, view detailed engagement analytics, and access updated alumni data. Protopia. Simple for them, simple for you.
Hello and welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for listening to Alumless for Friday, January 31st, 2025. This is the Volunteerism Within Engagement edition. I'm Ryan Catherwood, and I am joined by Chris Marshall, founder, CEO of CMAC. Hey, Chris, what's up?
Hey, Ryan, how are you doing? Excited for this show today. It's going to be a good one.
Yeah, when I was thinking about doing a podcast like Alumless, I was like, gosh, when are we going to get Cindy on? Because she's just the best. But she was working for another consulting practice, kind of on the dark side for a little while with another firm.
You're going right into it.
Named, and we had to just sort of wait till things sorted themselves out, and we had to sort of, just bide our time. But finally, we've got Cindy on the show, which I'm incredibly excited about. I can see her laughing backstage, which
you're going to get in trouble next time you see her, I think.
I think I might be in a little bit of trouble, but that's okay. She'll hopefully forgive me by the end of the show if I don't ask too many difficult questions. But I can see people already tuning in and shouting out where they're from, which is great. Thank you so much for listening to the show. And definitely go ahead and plug into the LinkedIn comment section where you're coming in from. We're so glad to have you. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to the podcast edition of the show to hear our 30-minute bonus segment with each of our special guests. And of course, we're grateful for Max Lyson and the team at Protopia for their partnership and for being a presenting sponsor of Alumless. One last quick plug. If you haven't already subscribed to the Alumless World podcast, we dropped our first episode last week with Maria Gallo. We've got another great episode coming up next Friday, the 7th, with Mandy McFarland, and she is the CEO of Educate Plus over in Australia. And so myself and Nicole Kempton and Mandy coordinated what had to have been the biggest international time zone recording session of the Alumless sort of so far. But definitely pick that up and add it to your feed. All right, so Chris, let's talk about volunteering. Let's talk about your volunteering, actually. I know I'm involved with my alma mater, the University of Richmond, help when I can. I know you are too with your alma mater, Lehigh. But to talk a little bit about your volunteer experience and how you like to be involved with your alma mater.
Yeah, and it's changed over time. I mean, I think it's a life stage, and we're going to be talking about this as on the other side. But having been in the alumni business, I've gotten to learn when and how alumni lives can just be so busy. And at some point, I was an admissions volunteer, and I had time to do that and interview students and do all the stuff that we did back in the day. But the most important lesson out of all this I learned, Ryan, was that when my life got really busy with work, family, other commitments that I made, learning to say no was the most important thing. Or not now. I mean, I rarely say no to alma mater when they ask for something, but what I've told them before when they ask me to do a specific thing, if I can't deliver it at the level I'm able to deliver it at, I say, thank you, but no, not right now. And I think that's a better answer than saying yes and doing a crappy job and delivering something that's not, or not doing it at all. And we have, all of us have had volunteer experiences or managed volunteers who say yes and then don't deliver. So I think learning that lesson on the other side and being able to say no and balance your life the right way so you don't overstretch, I think is really important.
Yeah, being a good volunteer, right? Coming through and being helpful
Right.
for or alma mater is incredibly important. Um, so let's talk about sort of the importance of volunteerism more broadly when it comes to engagement strategies. And we're going to bring out Cindy. We're going to talk all about it. But how do you think about it, the importance of volunteerism?
I think it's the most critical piece of it all. I personally believe, and maybe it's just my own lifestyle, life stage, or whatever, but that your time is more valuable than the money. So, getting people to give their time, I think, is the deepest form of engagement we're going to see. Of course, I don't give it that elite major gift level, so I can't comment on what that feels like. But from my world, it's the depth of it's the deepest form of engagement you can have, where someone is learning about you so well that they're helping you deliver on that commitment, whatever it is. It could be recruiting admissions. It could be, my activity now is mostly around athletics and the swim team. I'm still very active with what goes on there, but that's where I get a lot of value, and I hope I add value back. So to me, it's where the depth piece comes in.
Yeah. Well, let's keep the conversation going. I'm going to bring Cindy out, and we'll kick it around a little bit. There she is. Hey, Cindy.
Hello, hello.
Your
This
fan
is the
club
most
is anxiously waiting.
people ever on chatting in, Cindy. So it's all you. It's your fan base coming in here. So
Well, welcome everyone, and thanks Ryan and Chris. And Ryan, you forgot to mention that you and I go way back. You were actually our first director for digital engagement here at UVA. How many years ago? It has to be over 10.
Yeah, I was there for I guess it was almost 3 years, from like 2012 to 2015, in that range, and it was kind of digital before digital was cool, right? You were
Exactly.
out in front on that one.
And you were leading the way. And Chris, I've just really enjoyed working with you for so many years and all the wisdom that you bring. So it's a pleasure to be here today.
yeah, thanks for doing this, Cindy. Really appreciate it.
For those of you who don't know, Cindy Fredrick is the Senior Associate Vice President for Advancement, and she leads the Office of Engagement at the University of Virginia. Cindy, you've been passionate about the importance of volunteerism within engagement for a long time now. I remember we've talked a lot about your origin story with Madison House there at UVA. But what about this aspect of engagement do you find most inspiring, and how has the role of volunteers changed during your tenure?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think for me, the origin story actually goes way back even further, because I really think volunteerism changes people's lives. And I really know that firsthand. I think my journey and my career and who I am today are all rooted in the experience that I gained as a volunteer from the moment I could walk. So I grew up in a family of volunteers, and we were always giving, we were always serving. But I really developed the key skills and honed my leadership skills even as a junior high school student, having that ability to lead and build a community and have a better understanding of the world. And so I've built lifelong connections and discovered my purpose. And in every professional role I've had, volunteers have been essential to achieving our mission. So why am I most inspired about volunteerism? Because it changes lives, full stop. And so when people give freely, I think, Chris, you talked about it, when people give freely of their time and talents for the greater good, that impact is transformative, both for the individual and for the organization, and for the communities that they serve. And so it's not just a add-on. It's at the core of change. It's at the core of how we drive innovation, how we drive community building. To the question on how has it changed over the past 20 years that I've been with University Advancement, it's changed remarkably. I think the definition has broadened. The length of service has varied from, traditionally weekly service. I came from a very weekly service model. Volunteers sign in and they are weekly, and they're, to have impact, you had to do weekly. My it's changed, and my opinion on that has changed. And Ryan, I think you've been really you kind of challenged me in that, and I really appreciate that, for micro volunteerism, going to where our constituents live, and if they can give an hour of service a month, that could be valuable both for them and for us. And so now our volunteers, beyond just weekly service, they share their knowledge in the classroom, online spaces, mentorship program. They open doors through internships and career connections. They serve as fundraising ambassadors. They sign our fundraising letters. So you could make a huge difference by saying yes to be a signatory on one of our fundraising letters, or to be an ambassador for a giving day. And that is giving back of your time and talents, and that's volunteerism. And then finally, I think we've been seeing professionalism of volunteer management, but one thing is constant, and that's that people driven by their passions will give their time and their talent to create a better world.
Yeah. Cindy, having worked with you, I know how important volunteers are. And, the UVA Clubs program at the University of Virginia has a wonderful and established group of volunteers. And I know you've spent years working on building out that program. And now it's one of the best programs in the world, really, for a volunteer-based event planning. But I guess I wanted to ask you, what have you discovered about working with volunteers in service of planning and executing events?
Yeah. I think first and foremost, when someone says yes, and I really appreciate, Chris, your comment that it's important to say no sometimes, and for us as professionals to respect that from our volunteers. But when people say yes to helping plan events, what I have discovered is they really truly care, and they really, really want to help. They want to bring their best self to the work. They want to find meaningful connections, and they come with a really giving heart, full stop. And so they're excited about bringing a community together. They want to help with that event. But for volunteer engagement to be effective, we first need to have a shared common understanding of our mission and goals, have clear responsibilities and roles. And then on our end, for volunteers, for them to help plan and execute events, we've got to provide really strong foundational institutional support for them to succeed. When I talk to different colleagues, they're like, well, gosh, yes, I have all these people that want to volunteer and they want to help with events. And I just say, go and do it. If you take that model, in my opinion, you're going to have failure. They can be really effective in planning events by bringing fresh ideas and bringing skills and developing local connections in their communities that I don't have. And as and they fulfill the promise, as my mom taught me, many hands make light work, and they can really expand our reach. But in order for them to be successful, they bring their interests, and we need to listen as professionals. What resonates in San Francisco may not resonate in Boston versus Japan or someplace else. And so really that co-creation of partnership in executing events has been really powerful for me. But the day-to-day support of the professionals, you've got to put the time and energy into providing clear job descriptions, making sure you do training and orientation, making sure we're aligned in the mission. And from me is, what are the volunteers best at? And let them do that. And then where are we best at? And we're best at, thanks to Ryan, digital engagement, marketing, communication, registration, risk management, and budgetary support. If I want to have a record of who comes to events, I need to own that. I can't give that to the volunteers. And so that, for me, what I've discovered is that event planning is about teamwork and collaboration and sharing ideas, but it's a co-partnership. It's a win-win between volunteers and the professional staff at the institution.
Cindy, during the chat we were having in the pre-show, I jumped in and you and Ryan were talking about how UVA has moved from having 5,000 volunteers roughly that you were tracking. Now your number is up to 7,000. First of all, amazing number. Tell us the story about how that big jump happened. Yeah. And then you've already mentioned a couple of roles in the list you've ticked off of the volunteers do, but share other activities besides the clubs and some fundraising. But first, tell the story about how that big jump happened. That's really interesting.
Yeah, well, and it even did a bigger jump the year before. I think, one of my early mentors said if you don't have a point person really waking up every day, Bob Sweeney,
Yeah.
who is waking up every day thinking
Thinking
about
about this, right?
volunteer engagement
Yep.
at the broad university level. And so we had been really focused on what we were doing in University Advancement, our central program. But at the University of Virginia, and we'll talk about this later, we have our Alumni Association. We have 12, 13 schools. We have units. We have foundations. And so we have volunteers across the entire network. And everyone is doing great work, but how are we collecting information? How are we making sure that was getting into the database, that central database, so we could record and measure it? And so the biggest jump isn't because we haven't had more volunteers, it's because we uncovered them.
Yeah, we're tracking it better, right?
And we tracked them,
Right.
and we created a system for that to be simple. I think when we talk about any kinds of metrics or measurement, I'm a big believer in you have to make it simple. If it's not simple, you spend the majority of your time trying to track a metric instead of actually doing the work. So it was wonderful that we had one of our colleagues, that Andrea Devine, who could come in and focus on this for the last year and a half university wide. And so that's the biggest uptick. And so while yes, we have a lot of volunteers, and a lot of the volunteers that work in the Office of Engagement are event-based. The majority, by far, 80% of the volunteers at UVA are not event volunteers. They are mentors. They are guest lecturers in the classroom. They are advisors. They're helping us with internships and job placements. They're serving on foundation boards. They are, as I said earlier, signing letters for fundraising. They're involved in our boots on the ground. They're involved in volunteer leadership, but we have, like many of the probably schools on this call, we have volunteer service in the community. UVA is so well known for service as a value. And I ran our volunteer service center for students for many years before I came to UVA. And so we have thousands of alumni parents and friends that are serving the community. I was just looking at this past weekend, our UVA Club of Valet came together, 25 alumni too, and parents and friends, to work at the food bank to serve their local community under the banner of the University of Virginia.
Yeah,
and what a great way to fly the flag. We're not there right now, but who can provide care and compassion? It's our volunteer leadership in the field. And we see that over and over again. I can't fly out there to wrap my hands and my arms around the folks that we care about, but our leadership and our volunteers can be that because they're part of our institutional leaderships. So we've done a volunteer audit. We have 15 unique roles, responsibilities. So it's all over the map.
I love that you, at a place that does this well and is known for what you do in this area quite well, that you've seen this growth just by simply expanding the net of where you're capturing the information from by making it easy. So it's a good lesson for our listeners. Some people are in much smaller shops, right? Getting that data, make it as easy as possible to pull that into your central store.
Yeah, and just in that small shop, I mean, we are a large shop, but the majority of my career, I was in small shops. I worked in nonprofit, always with volunteerism, staffs of 2, 3, 4. But even in a small staff of 3 or 4, it is hard to even think about how do we define volunteerism? How do we get it when you have so many pressing things? How do you make it simple?
Yep.
So I just want to make sure that the listeners on board, if you're like sitting back going, oh my gosh, 5,000 volunteers, it's hard to keep track of 50 sometimes. And I know that from experience.
Yeah, good point. Good point.
Well, it's also like a really helpful activity for a new alumni director to sort of develop relationships around campus and discover the volunteerism that already exists, right? And attempt to sort of understand the needs, and so that you can both offer recommendations for other alumni to find roles. And I think it's, a great way to sort of expand internally and develop relationships. I noticed Amanda Sharp is tuning in from over in the UVA Club of London. And so this next question is, This next question is for her, and you mentioned Andrea Devine as well is helping lead your efforts in stewarding alumni volunteers. But I guess I wanted to ask you about stewarding. What makes good stewardship of alumni volunteers? And then I also wanted to ask you about faculty and other types of volunteers that maybe aren't alumni. And I know you've worked really hard to develop sort of volunteer recognition types of initiatives, and maybe you could just share a little bit about that.
Sure. I think number one, too many people think about stewardship after the fact. And so first and foremost, stewardship has to be thought of before you even ask someone to volunteer, because it begins with clear communication. You cannot have a good volunteer experience without communication that builds a strong rapport, keeps them informed, lets them know how their contributions are making a difference from the very beginning. So I think oftentimes we think about stewardship and recognition and appreciation at the end of the assignment. If you're waiting then, you've already lost the stewardship battle. And some people come to me and they say, our volunteers drop out, they're unreliable, they're not doing anything. I don't even have them to steward at the end. And that's because we're not thinking about stewarding them from the very beginning. And so that number one is key. Secondarily is providing the support and resources. Amanda's online, a great volunteer who brings those folks together, ideas, but we need to provide the resources for her. I often talked about how can we ease the burden of complexity. So how can we help them with their list, thinking through the project management? How do we offer training? How do we offer mentorship amongst our key volunteer leaders so that they can do peer-to-peer support training? I think feedback is essential. It's got to be a feedback loop. Are we asking volunteers what makes, how do they want to be recognized? What motivates them? Do we have our volunteers in the right place in the bus? It's very similar to employee engagement. I often look about volunteers as we need to treat our volunteers as important stakeholders like staff. They're not paid, and so it's a different relationship, but we need to treat them in the same manner of respect, of training. We would never just bring in an employee and say, go swim. Go have fun. I think Amanda would say as well is that creating that sense of belonging is knowing the motivation, and that's a stewardship volunteer. So I think those are the big things. And for faculty and for other volunteers, it's the same kind of feedback. It's the same principles. It's just a different audience. I think for me, it's, our volunteers align in the strategic vision, and especially our faculty members, they want to, we're coming into their world of mission, of how do we educate our students, and we have a shared mission of support for that. And so how do we involve them in that? And then finally, professional development opportunities. We cannot, for our faculty or for our volunteers, we have to add that into it. And so, those are just best practices. But I would say whatever you're doing if you have a great employee engagement offering, how do you adapt, modify that to your volunteerism?
While you're talking, your staff member Andrea is giving advice and offering her time up to people who are asking questions in the chat. So Andrea, thank you for that. By the way, we'll make sure
we're facilitating connections in the comments.
Right.
Yeah, that's what it's all about, right?
Yeah.
Good
And
stuff.
Cindy, you mentioned a little bit about the fact that, the vast majority of volunteerism at UVA is not in the service of producing events. That's sort of specific to maybe the clubs program or perhaps some of the others like lifelong learning or maybe some of the affinity programs over in the Alumni Association. But I guess if a VP came to a new alumni director and said, you gotta scale volunteerism, but you can't do it around events. Do you have a sense of what you might recommend to that alumni director?
Sure. And it's probably not the answer that you're looking for, Ryan, but I think this is where the time in my seat and years of managing up comes in handy. So the advice I'd give to an alumni director, if that came in, I'll give you advice if a new VP came into my office and said, you know what, we're no longer going to use volunteers for events. I would first start by asking a lot of questions, beginning with, tell me more. I love that question, right? I don't know where that's coming from. So tell me more. It's one of my favorite questions, because I would want to understand the VP's past experience and perspective on volunteerism. I would want to ask about their goals in advancement and what success looks like. So how do we scale volunteerism? What does that mean? Is it numbers? Is it types of offering it? Is it hours? There's just so much there that I'd want to unpack. And so that would help me have a better understanding of what's important to the VP, and then allow me to frame our work in a way that aligns with that vision. So I think this is across the board for anything, whether it's volunteerism, programming. How do you align? We have the university mission, we have the university advancement mission, then we have our office. All the goals need to align. And if they don't, you're wasting your time. And even if you're passionate about something, if it doesn't align all the way up, it's kind of that wasted time.
Yeah.
But then I would pause and reflect, and I would develop a plan, and I would provide that information to you. But I can guarantee you that I are confident that after I did that, I could develop a compelling case for why event volunteerism is a critical piece to meet their goals, but only one piece, and give him other ways to scale up volunteerism that met his or her ways of what success looked like. But for me, it's more not the how, it's not the what, it's finding out more the root the root issue of that question.
Tell me more. I love that. That's a great manage up question.
I was gonna say, and I guess in my head, like thinking about the question itself and where it came from is, our staffs are so good at planning events. We've developed such excellent competency in that area that do things move slower? Is it harder? Does the whole thing, would we be just better served if things were more staff led when it comes to events, since we're particularly good at that?
I say no, because I think that's where the scalability is. I mean, we've talked a little bit about the clubs, and I think, our clubs program, Amanda, we do 1,000 events around the world every year. Because we're able to scale that. Staff are only at 20% of them. So Amanda is leading those events. We're providing the resources. So that's the scalability. And so how do we train folks to be able to do that? This is a pipeline for training in a profession of community building, not just events, but how do you because I don't like just events, it's an experience. So we're training our volunteer leaders of how to create an experience to foster community and a deeper connection to our alma maters. So I just challenge that it's not better run by staff. I think our volunteers, they do a phenomenal job and better than staff sometimes, but they need staff as partners to be able to be successful. Anyway.
I love it. I knew you were going to have an inclination towards that the importance there. Chris, when we ask volunteers to make leadership decisions, there's some pros and there's some cons there, right? When we empower volunteers to be leaders, but what's your impression there of the pros and cons of putting volunteers into decision-making roles?
Yeah, well, Cindy just touched on the big one. I had written down the word scalability, right? It allows you, the pro is it allows you to have a broader reach, and the amount of stuff you can do with a volunteer army, well trained and well resourced, can be well more than what you could do with any staff that you hire. So that's the good news of it. The challenge, Ryan, you brought up in your follow-up question, which was, is it easier just to do it yourself versus spending time to manage the volunteers? So there's the con on that side of it. And I think it's a matter of training and communications. And Cindy clearly does it well at UVA to make sure that those issues are mitigated. The big one for me, though, I think is sustainability. How many times have you seen models where, a certain chapter is flourishing and then it fades away or becomes defunct or just stops operating completely because that volunteer had a baby, changed location, changed jobs, whatever their life was that they were going through, made it so that activity that was happening in that area suddenly dipped. And so that gets into, like, do you have people behind that main leader? Is there depth in your volunteer corps, et cetera? And my favorite model of this was at an institution we worked with, where they had tiered their chapters based on size and concentration. So there's like 5 or 6 chapters that were their biggest ones, where they have lots of alumni. And then they had like a tier 2, that you can imagine sort of the moderate size, and then a bunch of other ones beneath in tier 3. They didn't go out and advertise that, but what they said was this internally is that if we have that situation happen in tier 1, those are too big to fail. Staff will insert themselves and fix those problems in the tier 1 model and get more volunteers back involved and get it up and running again if there is that dip and that sustainability isn't there. So I like the model where you're focused on the largest regions and you're making sure that the most important ones, largest ones, are going to be sustained over time based on staff intervention. But I think that's a challenge that we face in this whole business. So, yep.
It's hard. It's not a small ask, is it? Like asking someone to be a volunteer leader of a club or a chapter. It's
anything, class, affinity group, you name it. Yeah.
All right. Well, we've got a question about volunteer pipeline development and moving people along a continuum, and I want to ask Cindy that question, but we're going to do it in the bonus.
You're teasing it. You're teasing it.
I love it. Run out of time. I have teased it, which means you all are going to have to subscribe to Alumless, the podcast version. Before we leave, everybody, Chris, who's coming up in 2 weeks?
Yeah, in 2 weeks, our next guest on Alumless US, I guess we're going to call it now, right, is Paul Clifford, formerly at Penn State University. Many people know Paul in the business. He's a well-known figure. He has left his role at Penn State, and he has graciously joined us at CMAC, and he's already making an impact. And Paul's going to talk about large, big, public, and all kinds of things related to a dues-based model, and you name it. So it'll be a fun conversation with Paul Clifford in 2 weeks from today.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you, everybody, for tuning in. There was a great chat for the show. Really appreciate it. Thanks to Kim and Fonty for managing the dialogue from our handle there on LinkedIn. We're so grateful that she could help us. And we'll take a quick break, and we'll be back with Cindy Fredrick if you are listening to the podcast. All right. Talk to you later. Bye.